The year is 1971. America is at war in Vietnam. And something deeply disturbing has just been revealed. At a village called My Lai, American soldiers, ordinary young men from ordinary towns, had massacred hundreds of unarmed civilians. Women, children, elderly people. The world asked one question. How does a normal human being do something like that? Was it that these soldiers were monsters? Or was there something about the situation, the uniform, the authority, the orders, that turned ordinary people into something unrecognizable? This question haunted a young psychology professor at Stanford University. His name was Philip Zimbardo, and he believed the answer had nothing to do with who these soldiers were. It had everything to do with where they were placed and what they were told to do. He decided to test this in the basement of a university building with students who had never harmed anyone in their lives. What happened next would shock the world and change the science of human behavior forever. Philip Zimbardo was not born into privilege. He grew up in the South Bronx, New York, one of the poorest neighborhoods in America. He watched his friends from the same streets go in completely different directions in life. Some became doctors and lawyers. Others ended up in prison. Same neighborhood. Same poverty. Same starting point. Completely different outcomes. This haunted him. If character was fixed, if people were simply good or bad, then why did environment seem to matter so much? Zimbardo believed psychology had been asking the wrong question. Instead of asking what kind of person commits evil, he wanted to ask, what kind of situation produces evil behavior in otherwise normal people? By 1971, he was a professor at Stanford University. He had a theory. He had funding. And he had a basement. Now he needed volunteers. Bardo placed an advertisement in a local newspaper. He was looking for volunteers for a study on prison life. 75 people applied. 24 were selected. All psychologically screened and confirmed healthy, stable, and normal. They were randomly divided into two groups. Half became guards. Half became prisoners. The prisoners were arrested at their homes, without warning, by real police officers. Handcuffed, processed, and brought to the basement of Stanford Psychology Building, which had been converted into a mock prison. They were given numbers instead of names, dressed in identical smocks, forced to wear chains around their ankles to remind them constantly of their captivity. The guards were given uniforms, batons, and mirrored sunglasses, specifically to prevent eye contact, which humanizes the person you are looking at. Zimbardo told the guards one thing: maintain order. He gave them no further instructions. Within 36 hours, without anyone telling them to, the guards began psychologically tormenting the prisoners, forcing them to do pointless push-ups, waking them at 3 in the morning for meaningless counts, taking away their mattresses, putting them in solitary confinement in a tiny closet. Prisoners began breaking down. One had to be released after 36 hours, due to severe emotional distress. Others began showing signs of complete psychological collapse. The experiment was supposed to last 2 weeks. On day 6, someone walked in and made Zimbardo stop. The person who stopped the experiment was not a colleague, not a fellow scientist, not an ethics board. It was Zimbardo's girlfriend, a psychology graduate student named Massacre, who visited the prison on day 6. She watched the guards humiliating prisoners through a one-way mirror. She turned to Zimbardo and said, "What you are doing to those boys is terrible." Zimbardo was stunned. He had stopped being a researcher. He had become the prison superintendent, deeply embedded in the very system. He was supposed to be studying objectively. He had lost himself inside his own experiment. It took an outsider to see what he could not. He shut down the experiment the next day. But the damage, both to the participants and to the reputation of psychology as a discipline, had already been done. Several participants reported lasting psychological trauma. There had been no proper informed consent. Participants had not been clearly told they could leave at any time. The experiment had no independent ethical oversight. In the years that followed, the Stanford prison experiment became the central case study, used to completely transform how scientific research on human beings is conducted around the world. Today, no psychology experiment can begin without approval from an independent ethics review board. A direct consequence of what happened in that basement. This experiment ended 50 years ago. It explains everything happening today. The Stanford prison experiment raises a question that none of us are comfortable answering. If you had been randomly assigned to be a guard, would you have been different? Most people say yes. The experiment suggests otherwise. Zimbardo spent the rest of his career developing what he called the Lucifer effect. The idea that almost any human being, placed in the right circumstances, is capable of behavior they would never believe themselves capable of. This isn't a comforting idea, but it is an important one. When photographs emerged from Abu Ghraib prison in 2004, showing American soldiers torturing Iraqi detainees, the world again asked, how does this happen? Zimbardo testified in the defense of one of the soldiers, arguing that the situation itself was the primary cause of the behavior, not the character of the individuals involved. The debate continues today. Are we fundamentally good people, occasionally corrupted by bad situations? Or are we something more fragile, beings whose behavior is far more dependent on context, authority, and environment than we would ever like to admit? The Stanford prison experiment didn't answer that question, but it made sure we could never stop asking it.